Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the match preview with me, Andrew Musgrove, and John Gibson, coming to you a day later in the Friday slot. But fear not, it will still be a great show as always. It has been a bit chaotic in my household, as you guys are well aware, and the chaos is continuing. But we've managed to get here. Thanks to John for rearranging twice. So please make sure you hit thumbs up, you get into the comments, you hit subscribe, and you share the pod amongst Newcastle United supporting friends and family as a sign of appreciation to John for changing his day for us and bringing us the match preview. Nottingham Forest, the visitors, on Sunday, John. And we were just saying off air, we're not really sure what to expect from this one.
Well, we're not. I'm not certain what to expect from Newcastle United, to be truthful, Andrew. I mean, it's not so much about Man City or about Nottingham Forest or about Liverpool in the next game. I just wonder what I'm going to see in my colours, in our colours, because I was absolutely shocked and stunned about Man City. We're not going to dwell on it, obviously, because we're trying to move on. But I mean, it was everything I wasn't expecting from us. We were passive. We accepted our fate almost. We didn't want a white flag. I don't mean that, but there was a shrug. If what was coming our way did come our way, we shrugged our shoulders and it was accepted. We're off pace. We're lacking desire, all the things that aren't our great hallmarks, and we showed it. And we tried to console ourselves, I guess, afterwards, and said, "Well, Man City with the new signings on their side, they're looking like the old Man City again. So is it as bad?" Well, yes, it is, because Man City showed last night against Real Madrid that they're still what they were before. I mean, there were, it was 3-1, and how they scored one, I don't know. They looked so far. They looked so far behind Real Madrid as we looked behind them, and they've got done both sides of the sandwich in between. They've got done by Real Madrid quite comprehensively. In Real Madrid, they have a good attacking side, but they're not what they were defensively. And it was very worrying. And I started off an absolute shock, and then I was sort of frustrated, and I ended up irritated because I thought that all the signs were produced alarm bells. What are we going to see between now and Wembley? Um, and every competition we are allowed to be in, Andrew, which is the Premier League, the FA Cup, and the League Cup, is on the line in the next 21 days. We play in all three competitions, so we can cement an effort to get into Europe. We can get to the quarterfinals of the FA Cup and win the League Cup, or we can blow the whole lot. And so Newcastle's reaction to Man City is so imperative because the season's going to hinge on these 21 or so days.
Do you think that might have played into what happened down at the Etihad? That not only maybe did the final become a distraction, but just the fact that it is a massive few weeks in Newcastle season as a
Oh,
whole. Even if you took the final out of the equation, John, you're playing. When you look at the fixtures coming up, Forest, Liverpool, you've played City. Those games kind of maybe define the top four, top five, and as you say, the FA Cup as well. I mean, is there just too many distractions for Newcastle coming into this month?
no, we call ourselves a big side and a big club, and we are a big club. We've now got to prove we're a big side. Distractions, the sides playing in Europe as well, on top of all this. I mean, this is the minimum we can get: the Premier League, the League Cup, and the FA Cup. It's not a congested fixture list. That is the minimum that's required of any side playing in the Premier League. Now, we can end up with nothing. And that's the big worry. And that would seem a shame after some of the highs we've had this season. But we could end up by not winning the League Cup, not making progress in the FA Cup, and not making Europe. Now, you could say that is, a defeatist's point of view, but it is realistically a possibility. Or we can plough on in all three, and wouldn't that be glorious? And what a finale to the end of the season then. But I tell you what, guys, make up your mind what you want to do, because there ain't any more time to think about it. You've got to do it now or you've blown it. And the way you played against City, you blow it. Because there's ways of losing, Andrew, and that wasn't one of the ways of losing.
Yeah, the manner of it was particularly alarming. You will lose to Manchester City, they're a good team, even in this run of form that they're in. But as we said, the manner is the issue. Also, bouncing back from this City defeat, John, and with the week or the weeks coming up, the month coming up, you would like to have a home game, wouldn't you, and have those home comforts? But the reality is, Newcastle at home recently hasn't exactly been brilliant.
Oh, I mean, the reality is frightening. You can look at it in two ways. You can say we've had three defeats in the last 15 games in all competitions, and we've won 12 of those 15. That is looking on the pint pot as half full. Half empty, we've lost three of our last four in the Premier League. And really, this is a match on Sunday that's between two sides that have done superbly, punched a little bit above their weight, and are suddenly facing reality. It's two teams who have fallen off the horse and need to remount very quickly. We've lost three of our last four Premier League games. Forest have won only two of their last five. So they're slipping and we're slipping. Who's going to come out of this on the right side on Sunday? It is an all or nothing game, and we have really got to show the correct attitude. Now, that's all Newcastle fans ever have asked for, in my opinion, Andrew. They expect the team to have a right attitude. This is always I'm talking about, not just this season. Always we've expected the team to have a right attitude, to care and to play for the colours. Then if we lose, and if we win. And that'll depend on the quality we've got. But we've got real quality. But how many wanted it at Man City? You know what struck me is all the blue chip players didn't turn up. It's we had two players off, senior players off at half time. Any of the other players come off. The best player on the pitch in our colours was an 18-year-old sub, Miley. Now, what's that say when you've got Anthony Gordon and Isaac and Tonali and Bruno on the pitch, and it's an 18-year-old sub? You know why he was the best player? Because he looked as if he was caring and he was wanting to turn the tide, and he was given. Perhaps it doesn't work all the time, but he was given. Livramento had a bit of that about him. But all our top players, I mean, they didn't turn up. It was alarming. It wasn't that City were good. I mean, we're not going to dwell on, but one point, take the first goal. I mean, it's a long punt from the keeper down the middle of the field where we our two centre halves, so we're marking somewhere on the halfway line. We've still got a man behind the guy that scores, who's goal side, Trippier. He's 5 foot four. For some reason, he decides to come round the front and try to head it. Makes a complete mess of it. The kid's just got to turn around, run on goal. The goalkeeper totally commits himself. He's almost carrying a banner saying, "Please love me." So the guy loves him. And all of a sudden, this guy gets a hat trick. And I tell you what, you know who should have got the assists on his three goals? Newcastle United, because we assisted him on all three. And if we play like that, by the way, and we turn up at the League Cup final like that, we get beaten because form isn't the tap to turn off and on. We get beaten, and we're also out of Europe and possibly out the FA Cup. So we better put. The first thing we've got to put right, Andrew, is attitude. That's the first thing we've got to put right.
Eddie Howe said, John, after the Man City game, that they're going to get back to basics. And I'll ask you what you think that actually means in a moment. But just on Sunday, obviously, as we've mentioned there, Newcastle's home form isn't fantastic. And there are questions starting to be asked about Fortress St James's Park, where one time you expected Newcastle to win against any team that rocked up, maybe bar Liverpool. Now, lesser teams than Forest are going there and having success. I mean, Fulham hadn't won in years and made like work of Newcastle United prior to that Arsenal League Cup victory. How important, John, is it, putting aside everything else, that Newcastle United once again reclaim the Fortress at St James's?
Oh, I mean, the thing that's kept us afloat for donkey's years is Fortress St James's. We've been putrid away from home, but at home, we've always known, with the crowd behind us and our determination to be carried out on our shield, that will get enough points to be okay. And that has been you look this season. I mean, we've lost it on Bournemouth. Admittedly, Bournemouth sounds like a lesser club, but the way they're playing, and they were terrific that day. But we've lost to Brighton at home. We've lost to West Ham at home. We've lost to Fulham at home. They're not, top quality Champions League sides. That they're not the big sides, and yet they've won at St James's Park. We're at St James's Park now. We've got to change it. Can you believe that this is the same side as beat Arsenal home and away in the semi-final of the League Cup, and have beat Arsenal 3 times out of 3 this season? I mean, two crazy ends of the spectrum, and Man City was alarming, not just because the score was huge, 4-0, but because of who we were playing. They are not the side they were or anywhere near it, and have proved it since. But what was alarming was just our attitude. Even Bruno, afterwards interviewed, sort of suggested that we were lazy. I know he's command of the English language. I think he meant off the pace, and he was on about his attitude. If we're thinking towards Wembley, that's no good. And so he's admitting that there is that problem in the dressing room, and his form wasn't any good either. Where was Captain Bruno? Like, he was missing his along with everybody else. And we've got to show very, very quickly that the simplest thing in football, which is your attitude and your desire, we recapture it. That's the simplest thing to get. Poor players can have that and get away with a few results, but we've got to, as far as I'm concerned, when Eddie Howe says go back to basics, what he means is we've got to start caring. We've got to start rolling our sleeves up. We've got to start fighting for the right to play the sort of football our talent can play. Because if we go in just passive, we are going to get smacked.
Well, Bruno, as you mentioned there, his interview did spark quite the reaction, but I suppose it's one thing that maybe gives you a bit more confidence heading into Sunday if you were searching for it, John, is the fact that so many of the players were off the pace that there's got to be reaction. It's not like one player's had a bad day. You're talking 10, 11 of those involved, including those that came off the bench. Miley's side had a bad day. So, fingers crossed we have a reaction from every single one of them and they blow Forest out of the water. For me, what was alarming about it, and there was many things about that performance against City that really stood out for me, but, they've usually turned up against these sides, your Cities, your Arsenals, your Man United. I know they're not where City are, but, the bigger sides that they've usually been pretty poor against, so that's why I was quite confident about a point. I look around, the rest of the league, we know they've struggled against those in the bottom half, but it's been kind of masked by the fact they've turned up against those in the top 6. If you can't win against the teams that you've like City and those that you've done all right against, or Arsenal's, where are you picking up the points in such a crucial stage of the season as well?
Yeah, I think the big difference, and you're right, we've turned up against the good sides. And the accusation's been, well, we can raise our game when it's in the public eye and in the domain, and it's the great showpiece game. And then when we play some of the smaller clubs, we don't. But what bothered me about City, this is the first time we've played a so-called big side and a big club, champions, albeit with problems. But this is the first time after we've beaten Arsenal and got to the cup. The cup is the common denominator. That's what's got in the thinking. Subconsciously, often, you don't want to be injured on the big day. You don't want to miss the big day. So you keep out of the 50-50 tackles. It can be subconscious, and then it spreads throughout the team. You need somebody in that team, like John Anderson in the old days, who roll their sleeves up here above them and go in with a tackle and take the ball, the bloke, and put him in Rose's head. And then all of a sudden, the crowd and the other players react to that. The other players are looking all around the field during the first half, and everybody's the same. Now, tell me what the conclusion can be, apart from the fact that the League Cup at Wembley's on the mind. Because they turned up in all the other games against the big clubs. They didn't turn up in this one, and they were passive, Andrew. And they were accepting of their fate. They were off the pace. You can have bad form. You can hit poor form. You can get beaten by a superior side, but you should never look like a side that is quite indifferent to what's happening to them.
No, 100%. And I think the concerns you've raised there are the concerns that Eddie Howe accepted in his post-match press conference, and he did seem visibly angry and unhappy with what he saw, and he was strong with what he said. Hopefully he's put that into action this week on the training pitch. And I said I was going to ask you about what getting back to basics means. You said there the attitude and caring, but also, John, looking at the way they're conceding goals recently, just not following your man at set pieces, stepping out of position. There's so much schoolboy defending in recent weeks. Even the goals that they conceded, or the goal conceded, was it against? I can't remember who it was. There was an example I was going to make anyway, and it was just very poor defending in recent weeks that they've got to stop. And I think that's what Eddie Howe will be looking at as well. Just doing the basics right at the back.
Oh yes, I think that's absolutely true. But if you've got a sloppy mind, then you're sloppy in your play as well. And if you've got a sloppy mind, like you're thinking about Wembley and that, then you do get caught in these situations. We have defended badly. I mean, we got done 4 goals at Man City. We got 4 goals done at home to Bournemouth. And some of the mistakes have been schoolboy, and they need to be eliminated. And we've got to look at every individual. And if I was every individual, I would be worried about if Wembley's so important. And I was Dubrovka, I would be worried about losing my place to Pope. If I was Trippier, I'd be worried about losing my place to Livramento. If I was the 2 centre-halves, I'd be worried about I was the one going out to let Bachmann in. You've got there's things that can happen if people don't turn up and do the business between now and then.
Yeah, but I question whether that is actually the case. And I raised this on the Monday show. Eddie Howe can't really come out and say everybody's place is up for grabs for the final, because the reality is it's not. The
No,
majority of
no,
players
but
in that starting 11 know who's starting, and I just wonder
yeah,
if that's a kind of issue.
yeah, you're right. You're right. I was just talking about the back there because you were talking about letting in all the goals at the back, and things can happen at the back. Pope can take over from Dubrovka. Livramento can take over from Trippier. Botman can come in for one of the 2 centre-halves. There's only Hall, who did very poorly down in Man City, that's probably unchallenged. But up beyond that, there are people that you can't say your place is up for grabs. Bruno, Tonali, Murphy, Isaac, and Gordon are shoe-ins. Doesn't matter how they play. I was just talking about the defence because we're talking about the goals conceded. But elsewhere, that's exactly the problem. And that's another problem that we'll talk about on another day, which is because of the lack of activity in the transfer market over 3 windows. It's created that. Yes, that is something we suffer from. And yes, defending doesn't just start with a back forward. It starts with the midfield as well, and even from the front. The greatest Liverpool side from way back defended from the front. Ian Rush was one of the best defenders they had, and he was scoring 30 odd goals a season. But yes, there's changes can be made to the back, but he's got to get back to basics, because if you're sloppy in the mind, you're sloppy in the body. If your mind is let's not get injured, people will run off you and punish you. And look, but I'm not suggesting they haven't got to get back to those bases as well. They have to, but you've got to cure that mental approach to the game, because it is like a cancer. It gets into the bones of everything and affects everything. And that's happened with Newcastle. I mean, it's been elementary. I mean, I was so furious after the game because I didn't think. I mean, someone else said to me, Brooklyn got blown away. The guy scored a first half hat trick. There wasn't a way back from that. We were done for. Why did he score a first half hat trick? Because we said, here's a plate, here's the goals on them. Do you want it? And he said, of course I want it. Thanks very much. We were the architects of our own downfall. City weren't great. We were awful. We were awful. And what uh, Real Madrid did to City at City and in Madrid, we could have done at the Etihad, and
Uh,
we didn't take the opportunity.
Do you look at the goals that they conceded against Man City, and all of them were absolutely shocking? And then the way they played as well, as you say, they were so passive and not tracking the men and just letting City walk through them. Is a week enough, John, to fix all that?
Well, my belief, and I think the biggest problem's mental, and a week's enough mentally. I mean, yes, they've got to work tactically on getting back to basics, being tighter, tracking runners and all that, but that should be second nature. That ought to be second nature to the guys we've got who have played at a good level for a long time. What you've got to do is get in there, get in between the ears, because this is the biggest problem of the lot, and that is a cancer that goes throughout the side. Now you can do that in 24 hours. I'm expecting a big reaction on Sunday. Why? Because I think players will be stung by the reaction of the public, the reaction of people like me, and you, and other journals, and other television and radio guys. They'll be stung, they'll be hurt, they'll be outraged. Do you realize who I am and how well I've done? Well, if they were happy to take all the plaudits that we, you and I and everybody else give them during that 9 match winning run, they've got to take the smack when it's deserved. And by Jove, it was deserved down at Man City. And you can get inside the head now. I think they will be stung because the first reaction will be the amount of criticism is far too harsh. Do you realise who we are? Do you realise we've just beaten Arsenal home and away? Do you realise we've just gone and won 12 games out the last 15? Do you realise? Do you realise? Yes, we do. And you were heaped with praise for that. And you would have still been praised for losing 2-1 at City with a heck of a defiant performance. But no, you lost 4-0. And I tell you what, you didn't seem at all blinking up too upset about it. It was all wrong. And I'm hoping that they'll be stung by the criticism they have got, and from fans. They will be hurt and then they'll be determined. Newcastle have played badly before and then come to St James's Park and shown a reaction. It'll irritate me that this has got to happen to produce some sort of reaction. But I say, God help us, Andrew, if we don't get a reaction on Sunday. Because where does that leave us? Going to Liverpool, going in the FA Cup, and then going in at Wembley final. Where on earth does that leave us for the run in if we don't see a reaction? But we've got to bear in mind, they were a disgrace at City. Everybody said they're a disgrace. They're stung. They're playing at home, and there's 50,000 Geordies there. They'll get behind them and forget about City if they start on the front foot and bang. But if they faff about again, those 50,000 will turn on them, mate. They will turn on them because this will be a disappointment. And you know what we see? We see a whole season going up in smoke. No Europe, no cup for the first time in 70 years, and no second cup with the FA Cup because Brighton's done us once up here this season already. So this is all or nothing. And there's no time, there's no recovery space. It is literally now. And we've made it this way because anything short of a victory against Nottingham Forest, what do we expect to get at Liverpool in the league? Forget it about it being a rehearsal for Wembley. It's 3 points towards getting in the Champions League. What would we expect at Liverpool if we don't get 3 points against Forest?
It's that word again, isn't it? Momentum's absolutely key. And we were
Oh,
hoping it would come with a performance against City. It didn't, and now they have to not only right the wrongs of City, but also get that momentum started heading into, as you say, Liverpool in the league, FA Cup, and then down into the cup final. Just a reminder, ladies and gents, that this episode is sponsored by NordVPN, and you can get yourself a very special deal. Just £2.22 a month for the basic plan, saving yourself 75%. You'll get an extra 4 months on that. The most you could pay if you want the premium plan, which is definitely worth it, is £4.53. So just over the price of a premium cup of coffee. You can get yourself protected and help support the podcast. The link is in the description box. Do click on it. It is definitely worth your time of signing up. John, in terms of the race for you, I mean, this is a must win for Newcastle United, isn't it? Because the defeat to Manchester City and then the subsequent results that went or had gone or went afterwards last weekend means that Newcastle United are at the moment they're 6 points off Nottingham Forest. They are 3 behind Manchester City. So, if Forest won this game, I can't see Newcastle United making up 9 points, if I'm being totally honest. And Newcastle also, they need to capitalise on the fact that Forest lost to Fulham. And as you say, their form coming into this game isn't exactly brilliant. We now expect, John, City probably to continue the good form in the Premier League of late. I know they slipped up against Real Madrid in the Champions League, but that is Real Madrid. I think really we're talking Champions League. You're looking at 5th if the coefficient goes the Premier League's way, and then 4th, which I expect Forest to be fighting for. I think Forest might drop off a little bit and City, as we say, rise. It's such an important game, though, isn't it, in terms of Newcastle's chance for the Champions League?
Totally. I mean, if we go about it the right way, City, by the way, coming back after Real Madrid, are playing Liverpool. So if City get beat by Liverpool and we play Forest, we're back level with City. So we'll get back into it. But we've got to do that. We keep saying if we've lost 3 of the last 4, if we lost to Forest or only drew, and then we'll go down to Liverpool and lose, because anybody can lose at Liverpool, ironically, apart from Nottingham Forest, who won there. If we did that, we're in dreadful situation. But one of the several reasons why I'm expecting a huge reaction, I really am, Andrew, and it's because of the way this week's gone and the anger that's been in the hearts of lots of and frustration and irritation and lots of Johnny who adore this side, who have been profuse in saying how wonderful they are when they went on this long run of all the victories. So there's no way the players can say this is a fickle crowd, etc., one defeat and the turn on. Hey, listen, son, you go home and watch that defeat and tell me that your shirt needed to go into the laundrettes at the end of the game for the sweat on it, because it didn't. It could go straight in the bag to be used in the next game. I mean, but one of the hopes I've got for this is, if you possibly don't remember, Andrew, but when Forest were flying without wings early in the season and were right up there, and I said I wasn't sure at all that they would stay the course, because it's a Grand National course and because they'd played a lot of games that weren't against the really tough sides. They played a lot of those games when he examined the games. And I said, can they last the distance? I still query if they can last the distance. They're now showing the cracks that I thought they would show eventually. They've only won 2 of the last 5. In their next 3 games, us, Arsenal, and Manchester City. Now, when you're out of form like them, that's not 3 easy games. Neither are ours, as it happens, but they are not what they are. By the way, let me redress. Whatever happens to them, they will have had a fabulous season. To go from the jaws of relegation to fighting for a Champions League position in February, still up there, they have done magnificently well. We need to do something more than we've done so far. We were 7th last season, we're 7th now. We've got to finish above 7, well above 7, and we've got to try to win the cup. We're only an hour and a half off 1 cup. And by the way, in the FA Cup, we've got a home draw to go into the quarterfinals, and a lot of big clubs like Liverpool and like Arsenal are out of the FA Cup. So you've got a real chance there as well. So we've got things that we must do. But I mean, I think we've got a terrific chance in this match if we get our heads screwed on right. And surely to goodness, it doesn't matter how much you don't put on the telly and you don't buy your papers this week and you only see a newspaper when it's at the bottom of your fish and chips. They're still going to be aware of what's been said if it's on social media or whatever. And if that hasn't stung them into saying, hey, enough's enough, I'm sorry, I temporarily was gazing into the future and that, but I tell you what, I'm off going to get into it on Sunday, then we'll be okay. If we do that, we'll be okay. If we don't, all our dreams will get blown out the window.
And also, John, it's not just about looking up either, though, is it? It's looking over your shoulder slightly, because
Yeah.
Fulham and Villa, 39 points. Fulham play Crystal Palace and Villa face Chelsea. So if either one of those pick up a win and Newcastle United lose, and the table looks a lot worse, doesn't it? But fingers crossed they can pick up a victory. And you know, Forest are a good side. They're a counter-attacking side. They move with pace. They've got some excellent players, none other than Elliot Anderson as well. I suppose we'll have to just have a quick word about him. It's great to see him, isn't it, John, going from strength to strength in this Forest side. Hopefully he has a stinker on
Well,
Sunday. But
yes, absolutely. And sorry, Grandad, I didn't mean that, mate, but I do really for this one-off game, and Jeff Allen would totally understand that. Yes, they've done well, but let us not also lose sight of the fact that we've beaten them twice this season and both on their ground. We knocked them out of the League Cup and we beat them 3-1 down there in the Premier League. So, we've got to stop bulling up these other sides and knocking down ourselves. If we've got the right frame of mind, we beat Forest again. And we'll make it 3 wins out of 3 this season against Forest, just as we made it 3 wins out of 3 against Arsenal, who are a better side than Forest. And Forest are a good side on the wane. They'll say we are a good side on the wane. 3 defeats in the last 4. And both those statements are correct. It's who puts it right and who doesn't. We've got more to lose because whatever happened, their fans will, when this season's over, will say they've done terrific. Isn't it wonderful? And they'll be optimistic about next season. If we only finish 7th and win neither of the cups, or heaven forbid, finish below 7th, we won't be happy. So we have still got to make our fans happy at the end of the season because we're so close to doing something great. We're so close to, and we know we've got the ability to do it. We've got the ability. If you look at our front 3, dear oh dear, and you look at Tonali and Bruno. I mean, what happened to Tonali down there? The Wonder Man that we've been watching just looked, but he wasn't alone. I could say that about everybody. What happened to Gordon? He looked exhausted when he ran out at the start. And Jacob Murphy was going that far backwards towards his own goal. He never got forward. And Isaac got no service, but he didn't go looking for it. He didn't drop back and look for the ball and fight for it and say, come on, let's go. And, we were passive all over the park.
we certainly were, and that's why we expect a reaction from everybody that starts on Sunday. Because other than Lewis Miley, I don't think anyone could really have left
Yeah.
Etihad with their head held high. And that's where we'll start, John, because that is the big decision I think Eddie Howe has to make. For many people, it's not even a decision that he has to make. It should already be done and dusted. Lewis Miley starts on Sunday?
Yes, because Joe Linton won't, because Joe Linton's not fit. I mean, I look at the whole team, and I mean, you could actually, and of course you don't. The front 3 are untouchable, and 2 of the middle 3 are untouchable. But you could leave anybody out if you just did it on the performance down there from the starting 11. Um, I think I would bring Pope in for Dubrovka. I think Dubrovka's done absolutely fabulous, but I thought he got exposed by other people down there, but he got exposed by himself. I mean, on the first goal, yeah, you stay where you are, you come all the way. You don't go into no man's land and say, I've made it dead easy for a quality player to chip me. I think I'm not talking about what I do for Wembley. I'm not even thinking about Wembley because how we play against Forest and against Liverpool down there and against Brighton in the Cup and another Premier League game will determine that. I'm just talking about Sunday. I would start Pope, I think, for Dubravka. I would start Miley as the third midfield player ahead of Willock, and he's already ahead of Longstaff. Um, I would be tempted to start Botman if he was available, but he probably won't be and may not be risked, and maybe will be kept for Liverpool at Anfield. Um, but he could get in for either the centre half, so I'd probably start him alongside Burn. And of course, you go with the 3 up front because A, there's no alternative, and B, on the day, they're super.
And you made the point on the last match preview that you would start Tino Livramento, even though we felt Eddie Howe would go with Kieran Trippier. He did go with Kieran Trippier, and Trippier was horribly exposed and then subbed off at half time. again, it's not a decision that needs to be made. It's probably already been made. It's Tino Livramento to start, isn't it?
Yeah, that I forgot to add him into that team selection thing. Livramento, I would start with Pope. I would have Livramento. I'd have Botman if you could, but you may have to hold him back. And I would have Miley in the midfield. Um, I think that's the way you've got to go. Yes, it's a game too far for trips. Livermento's played for England this season. And I think he did do okay when he come on. I mean, the game was lost, and everybody said, "Oh, we did a bit better in the second half." We only lost the second half 1-0 after losing the first half 3-0. But City didn't have to win the game in the second half; it was already won. They just had to play out time and added another goal. But I think you've got to freshen up that side that played at City. And I think also, Andrew, you've got to send, I know you can only do it in certain positions and certainly not up top, but you've got to send some messages out to players. Listen, you're not automatic. If you put out the same team, players think, I'll never lose my position. Put out Pope, put out Livramento, put out Miley, play Botman if he's available. Because they're shrewd changes and they probably deserve changes anyway. But let's make players start to think a little bit.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, again, it goes back to the point that he probably hasn't got the depth to send out a proper message because they'll probably know it's kind of a on false ground. But that's, as we said, subject for another episode. I think Gordon will be absolutely key to this performance on Sunday. John, as we said, was nowhere to be seen against Manchester City, but Fulham got the better of Ola Aina on the right side of Forest's defence. So you would think if Gordon's up to it, we expected him to take it to Rico Lewis, and he really should have made the most of that. He didn't do. But again, Gordon's one of those players that when he's faced criticism, when he's had a particularly bad game, all of a sudden you see exactly what he's about, and he must just use it as added motivation. And there's no time like the present on Sunday.
That's absolutely right. Though why these guys need motivation to play well, I'm not certain. My motivation would be to get my bank statement out and see the wages I've got and think, by the Jove, I've got to earn them because that's big dough. I've got to justify that, else there's something wrong. I would get my bank statement out if I wanted motivation because I would want to keep getting those sort of wages. Um, yes, he is very important. I mean, the funny thing is, it was pre-Man City. It was Isaac against Holland, who's the greatest centre forward of the lot. And by the way, both of them didn't register in that game. And now it's Isaac against Chris Wood for who's the best centre forward of the lot, because Isaac's got 17 Premier League goals and Chris Wood's got 18. So there's another centre forward thing. I hope this time this one takes off and Isaac wins it hands down, because the Isaac v Holland thing, which was well trumpeted, thoroughly understood, never was a significant part of the game, was it?
No, it wasn't at all. And very frustrating because we all expected it to be. But it's interesting on Sunday because we've done the view from the opposition. And if you haven't watched yet or listened to it, go back and find it because it's really insightful from Matt Davies of Forest Focus. And he said that the teams that have beaten Forest of late, including Fulham, basically what they did was they pushed one of their wide men into the number 10 position and exploited the space between the midfield and the defence because they haven't got a proper number 6. Now, we know that issue for Newcastle United was something that dogged our season very early on. Thankfully, Tonali's seemingly Man City aside right at home in that position. But, if that's what the Forest guys are saying, then you have to hope that if it's worked for Fulham and whoever else it's worked for, he did give a couple of examples that Newcastle United have done their homework, and we might see either Jacob Murphy, but more probably Anthony Gordon, maybe pushing into a central role just to begin with, and then exploiting that space.
Yeah, sure. But whatever way we play, I'll go back to we've beaten them twice this season. So if we play our way, it beats them. And by the way, when we beat them 3-1 down there, it was a better Nottingham Forest side results wise than it is currently. So we don't need any examples on how to beat. We've beaten them twice, for goodness sake. If you go man for man, we have got better players than they have, and they've got some good players. Their two wide players, Hudson-Odoi and Elanga, are terrific. Elliot Anderson and Gibbs White in midfield is terrific. And the guy I don't think is that terrific has still scored 18 goals from centre forward. So they've got good players. But I think they've punched so far above their weight, and they've used the fewest players in the whole of the Premier League this season. They've used the fewest players because while they had a huge squad by buying everybody that was passing by on a day out, they would hold them into the ground and sign them. The manager that come in decided he could only rely on a small number of players. To a certain extent, we've been the same. It's been forced on us. So they have good players, but man, you see, they've got good players when they're on the pump. We've got good players when we're on the pump. But I mean, we had good players down in Man City, but you wouldn't have guessed it. They've got to get up for it and they've got to do the fight. And I tell you what, if we get the 3 points, we're still playing catch up for Europe because how many points are we going to get at Liverpool on Wednesday night? And if that's a defeat 1-0 or 2-1 or 3-2, which is honourable, and I'm not suggesting it will be, but that's honourable, we're still laying off the pace again without these 3 points. A draw's no good. A draw is absolutely no good if we're talking about Europe. Draw's no good.
So you're saying then it's a must win on Sunday?
It is. I know we've said that many times, but they've made it a must win because of what they did against Manchester City and because the mass panic that they set off throughout the Geordie tribes by playing the way they did. I emphasize once again, we accept defeat and there's a way to lose, and that was not the way to lose.
Yeah, indeed. And of course, as we've said there, a victory for Forest would put them probably a little bit too far for Newcastle United to catch. So I agree with John. I think it is probably a must win, or it is a must win on Sunday, most certainly for the race for Europe, but also because you want to go into this final in good form. You want to avoid the results and form that we had the last time around against Manchester United and, of course, Liverpool, a much better side than the Red Devils. Come on then, John. How's it going to go on Sunday? You've already said it. It's a win, right?
Yeah, we're going to win. We're going to win because we have to win, and because it might have dawned on these guys that we have to win. I mean, in that we've mentally not got to save ourselves for a game that's 5 games down the line or whatever it is. We've got to win. They aren't the side that went third top. They're not that side anymore. It can be argued we aren't the side we were a few weeks back. But I think we will win, and the score almost doesn't matter as long as we do win. But I think it'll be something like a 2-0.
Well, I would take that. I have to say, I'm not as confident for victory as you are. I agree. It's a must win, but I'm going to go for a point. I'm just not sure everything's clicking for Newcastle United in terms of just that form and that formula. I hope that maybe the introduction of Lewis Miley might change that. Isaac, obviously, always a threat, but I don't know. I'm just worried about the distraction of the final. I have to be
Well,
honest. And
well,
we'll go for
that's
a
an
point.
absolute disgrace. I don't mean from you, from Newcastle United, and they did that at Man City. It's an absolute disgrace that the finals a distraction. It's not a distraction for Liverpool, I'll tell you. And you could say that's because they've got bigger fish to fry, like win the Premier League and win the Champions League. But I tell you what, they're not too concerned as of this moment we're talking about now. About do you think they'll be holding themselves in store for a League Cup final at the moment? When they can win the Premier League and the Champions League, they will keep going with their foot right down on the accelerator. And you say the distractions, and yes, you're so right. That's what's made me panic. But we've got to get on with it. This is winnable. They're not the side they were. Um, we wonder if Newcastle will be up for it or if it's going for them at the moment. It's not going for Forest at the moment. It's not going for Forest. You can say this is a very good game for them to have after the humiliation of Man City because they're at home, because they'll get a bit of kudos if they beat this side because it's in the top 3 or 4 at the moment. But they're on a bit of a slippery slope the way we are. Who wants it the most between us? And we are at home. And by the way, that is a huge, huge advantage with 50,000 Geordies. But you put in a performance like City and see what you'll feel like playing in front of 50,000 Geordies for an hour and a half and tossing it in the wind. So it is a big, big match. And if I am wrong over this and we don't win, because by the way, you're just giving your result. But by the way, as I've already said, a draw is a bad result for Newcastle United. It is a bad result because you then lose at Liverpool. And how many points have you got out the last few Premier League games? It's a bad result. And if we don't get it right mentally and results wise against Forest, what optimism do we have for Europe, for the FA Cup, and then Wembley? What do we base our optimism on? It'll be like pricking a balloon after Geordie's been ready to put the bunting out.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed, John, your result does come home and Newcastle United managed to pick up all 3 points against Nottingham Forest. Thank you for always coming on and providing the match preview to you guys watching and listening. Hit thumbs up, hit subscribe, get into the comments. I will respond to each and every one of you. Make sure you take advantage of that exclusive NordVPN plan as well. And for myself and John, we will see you guys next week.
Take care.